Okay, so I'd like to briefly address Koyach Nissan. We are coming up on the historic day of Koyach Nissan, Tafshin and Beis, not Tafshin and Aleph. Koyach Nissan, when the Rebbe said that he's done everything he can to figure out how to get us to bring Mashiach, and now he's turning it over to us. And so I'd like to just address that also, since we're coming to this propitious time, and we should really, live with the times. And we're learning Sheva Mitzvos and Enoch, we have to live with the times. So I'm going to address briefly the concept of what the Rebbe is addressing over here and how it relates to what we're talking about. So the Rebbe says, if everyone is familiar with the concept here, but I'll just briefly state that the Rebbe said after we see that all our efforts to bring Mashiach haven't helped because Mashiach is not actually here. And it's amazing, it's wondrous, and it's very disturbing that there's so many Yidden listening to this, the Rebbe speaking, and it doesn't bother them that Mashiach is not going to come tonight or the night after that, God forbid. The Rebbe is very, very disturbed by that, and the Rebbe is speaking directly to Chabad Hasidim. He's not speaking to people that are, playing basketball on the street corner and are not thinking about Mashiach. Even the Rebbe is pointing out that even with all the fact that people are running to come and hear the Sichos of the Rebbe, the fact of the matter is at the end of the day, they're okay with going to sleep without Mashiach coming. And even when they scream Ad Mosai, it's only because they're being commanded to do that. And if they had really, really intended it, then Mashiach would, and cried out, truly the Mashiach would definitely have been here. So the Rebbe says, I don't know what else I could do to make it, to bring about a change that all of Bnei Yisrael will scream in truth and effect to bring Mashiach in actuality. Because after all that's been done until now, it hasn't helped. Because we're still found in Gullus. And not only that, but the Gullus, the internal Gullus. Gullus Panimi Inyane Avedis Hashem. This is an internal Gullus in the matters of serving Hashem. So, and the Rebbe says this is the main thing. So that's really important to realize that when we are limited in our own experience of Hashem's world and what's possible in Hashem's world, that is really the core of the Gullus. So the Rebbe says the only thing I could do is to give it to you. So the Rebbe is saying that, by the way, he's not saying that he's not going to do anything else to bring Mashiach, because later on he clearly says he's going to give tzedakah to help bring Mashiach. But he's giving over to us the figuring out what is going to transform the Yidden into these catalysts to actually bring the Geula. And hopefully there'll be 10, they'll be stubborn, and like they were meant to be a stubborn people, and will affect by Hashem to bring Mashiach. And Hashem is going to, we can ignore all the things that we have not done until now, which means to say over here that the Eibush, because of our stubbornness and our willingness to go ahead, that all the things in which we lacked in the past to actually bring Mashiach is irrelevant at this moment forward, because now we're actually living on this level of Ava Rabbah, which is really this stubborn connection to Hashem that we're going to bring about the Geula. So then the Rebbe says he's going to do his part to add tzedakah in order to increase it, increase the speed of coming Mashiach. And it says at the end, hopefully there'll be 1, 2, or 3 that will figure out a plan and how to do it. And my suggestion is that we can take a deeper look at 2 things over here. One that relates to what we're talking about. One is that the Rebbe says clearly in Yonam Shehem Ba'ifin Det Eres Deteyu Al B'Kelim Detikun. And this is something that is, Eres Deteyu and Kelim Detikun is constantly referred to. I've heard many, many times is talking about great in Yonam, brought down into the Kelim. It should be an Ifin Miskabel, and there's different explanations of that. So I would like to suggest that there's a deeper meaning to this. And one of the things that the Rebbe wanted us to do was to learn. It's interesting, when people came to the Rebbe and they said, Rebbe, we want you to do it. And the Rebbe says, no, I really meant it that you should do it. And then they came to say, Rebbe, oh, okay, if you want us to do it, but we don't know what to do. So the Rebbe says, and basically learn Yanei Gula Mashiach, and also learn, Torah, the Kutei Torah, and Likutei Sichos, and so forth. So if you look in Torah, it says, Parshas V'Yishlach, V'Yishlach Yaakov Malachim Lafanav Es Esav Achiv Chulu, Hine Yedua SheYaakov Shosha Hu Mebechinas Shem Ma De Elam DeHatikun, Shosha Shel Esav Hu Mebechinas Elam HaTehu, Ve'eres De Tehu Hem Gedolim Me'ed V'Lo Yochlu Lislabesh B'Teicha Kelim, Nistalkul Me'Kelim Behem Bechinas Habakifim Me'Kelim Nishbar V'Naflu Lamata Lachen Hayo Esav Shelamata Rasha Aval Metzad Shosha Be'Mekifim Tehu Har Ha'eres De Tehu Hem L'Mayla Me'eres De Tikun. What does that mean? I'm suggesting that the real meaning, when the Rebbe says the way to affect this change in the world is through Eres de Tehu and Kelim de Tikkun. The whole point was, the whole digression of creation was that the Eres of Tehu were not able to be mislavish in the Kelim de Tikkun. Esav is this great figure of this tremendous light, and it requires the refinement of Yaakov to be able to bring it down into the Kelim of Yaakov. The Eres of Tehu have to come down into the Kelim of Yaakov, into the Kelim of Tikkun. And this is exactly the relationship between the non-Jews and the Yidden. The non-Jews are this tremendous Eres to Tehu. That's the level of Esav. And the job of Yaakov is to be able to harness that. It should come down into the Kelim of Tikkun, that it should be able to change the world. When you only have the Eres of Tehu, then you just have wild energy that is not able to, and it shows up in the world as a Rasha, as a wicked person. If you only have the Kelim of Tikkun, then you have a limited expression of godliness. That is what we are living through right now, limited expression of godliness. The Yidden do Torah mitzvahs, and it's still not the fulfillment of Hashem's vision for the world. When you take the Eres of Tehu and you bring them together into the Kelim of Tikkun, and you are able to harness the Eres, now the Kelim of Tikkun are able to direct that, which was Yitzchak's real intention, that he wanted to see Esav refined, and he wanted Esav to be able to have this tremendous impact on the world. In order to have this tremendous impact on the world, though, it had to be refined and directed through the Kelim of Tikkun. So this is what the Rebbe is saying when he says over here in Parshas V'Yishlach. The Alter Rebbe is saying, he's giving us there's one meaning of Eres to Tehu and Kelim de Tikkun according to the Alter Rebbe in V'Yishlach. This is what it's referring to. So when the Rebbe is saying in Koyach Nissan that to take the Eres, Yanim Shehim Ba'ifin the Eres to Tehu, I will be Kelim de Tikkun. We need to harness this tremendous energy of the non-Jews, a tremendous energy of Esav, and to bring it down into the Kelim of Tikkun, which is the Yidden, and that will bring the Gula. And these 10 people are supposed to be able to figure out what it is, and the 1, 2, 3 people are supposed to figure out what it is necessary to actually accomplish that, because you have to change the mindset and the actions of the entire world. You have to, first of all, and I don't want to say which is first and first, but you have to transform the mindset of the Yidden that are not thinking that they need to harness the energy of Esav. They're only thinking about the life that they're enjoying in the limited aspect of Tikkun. And you have to change their mindset. So that's one of the first things that has to be done by these people who are going to figure out what needs to be done. And the Rebbe said he's tried and tried and tried to get us to change our perspective and our actions, but it hasn't helped. And also you have to figure out how to transform the entire world, that the Eres to Tehu, that will be able to be harnessed, that awaken that light, that it will welcome the opportunity to be harnessed by the Kelim de Tikkun, which is the Yidden, through teaching the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach and everything that goes with that. That's what Mashiach is. Because we've already learned that the whole Ikar Chidush of Mashiach is the way the nations of the world will be conducting themselves and how they will be transformed through Mashiach Tzidkenu. And what we're doing now is a preparation. It's a preparation for that. It's a hachana and a me'ain, the Rebbe is saying. So this is the real meaning of the Sicha Koyach Nissan. The Rebbe is giving us a roadmap. When people didn't get the roadmap, they came to the Rebbe and said, okay, first of all, they didn't want to accept upon themselves to do it, so they asked the Rebbe to do it. They're missing the point. The Rebbe is saying, no, you've got to figure it out. Then they come back and say, okay, Rebbe, we're going to do it, but we don't know what to do. So the Rebbe says, you don't know what to do because you're not looking at the roadmap. You're not looking at the blueprint for creation, which is found in the Nevi'im, which is found in Yonei Gula Mashiach. That's going to explain to you this. What do all the Nevi'im speak to? All Nevi'im all speak to that the nations of the world are going to come and serve Hashem. So if you need to know, as we spoke about in a previous class, you start with what your end goal in mind is. You have a very clear picture of the what that's going to be like, and then you work backwards from there. So that was saying, I'm telling you to figure it out. If you're telling me you don't know what to do, it means you don't know what the end result looks like. The only reason that you can say that you don't know what to do to bring Mashiach is because you don't have a clear picture of what the end result is supposed to look like. So first, you've got to recognize what Mashiach is supposed to look like. And that you learn the Navi. And the Navi tells, every single Navi talks about the change in the world. That how the world is going to be completely changed, and that every human being is going to recognize Hashem, and the Yidden are going to be teaching. And once you learn that, it's clear what needs to be done. We need to go and to teach the neighbors, the people in business, the people, the world leaders, the people on the street, on all levels of society, the people in the jails, need to teach them that there's one Hashem, and that this Hashem loves them, and He's taking care of them. And because we learned before, the mitzvah, the third mitzvah of mitzvahs, Tariq mitzvahs, of the positive mitzvahs asay, is to love Hashem. The Rambam says that is our obligation, to love Hashem so much that we're going to teach all the nations of the world about Hashem. So that is what the Rebbe is looking for over here. Now, it's very interesting that in common parlance over the last 30 years, 25 years, 26 years, this whole concept of it being an active force has been lost. The Rebbe is talking about making a major change in the world. So I found over here, there's a Hayom version of a Hayom Yom called Tackling Life's Tasks. It's a nice, big, beautiful volume. And if you look in here from Chof Gimel Nissan, the Rebbe says that they bring down over here in after the Oros of Achan Shel Pesach and Suda Shel Mashiach, and you can watch the video that we have explaining the Suda Shel Mashiach. The Rebbe explains the special role of Mashiach. So the Rebbe says in Chof Gimel Nissan that there's this leap of relationship between the Yidden and Hashem, and there's this whole leap of the world. And we experience freedom, and then we have to come back into the world. We have to transform the world. So the person has to have a resolute power that it generates, enabling us to continue on in the world, and not just to survive, to thrive and change over the whole world. So here's how the editors then explain this in their own language. They bring the Sicha from Koyach Nissan, and they summarize it very briefly. And then they say that the Rebbe later clarified his intent to encourage study of the subjects of redemption and Mashiach as they are dealt with in classic Torah texts, particularly as understood by Chassidus, and in the Maimarim and Likutei Sichos of the Nasi of the generation. 1 second. That's not what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said that's not what the Rebbe is calling, this call from action to Koyach Nissan. He's not calling merely for us to learn Torah. He's calling for us to transform the world. But what's misunderstood is because when the Rebbe later, people say to the Rebbe, what are we supposed to do? He says, well, learn the roadmap, then you'll figure it out. You'll see what needs to be done. The people got confused and said, oh, the Rebbe's instruction to us is to read these texts. And if we read these texts, that's fulfilling the Rebbe's instructions and cry from Koyach Nissan. And it's clearly not the case. The Rebbe's cry from Koyach Nissan is for us to change the entire world. Reading the text is to educate ourselves from our poor, paltry education that we don't realize what the world is supposed to be looking like. So we're supposed to learn those things, and then once we know them with a knowing, a das, then we walk in the world. And what do we see? We see all these human beings walking around ready to receive the message that Hashem is the king of the world, and that there's nothing besides Hashem. That's what the Rebbe wants us to learn for. So you could see how in the decades that have gone since Koyach Nissan, it's become such a limited instruction. It's now just merely learn these texts. But they go further. They go further to even more minimalize the effect. By studying and internalizing these sources, we reframe our thought processes and open our eyes and hearts to the living promise of redemption. This will generate, that's a change in us, but it's totally passive, meaning to say, I'm going to learn, that's active, and I'm going to change my perception of the world, but now I will see the promise. This will generate ripples of Mashiach consciousness throughout our surroundings and cultivate an environment in which the mission of Mashiach can actually be fulfilled. 1 second here. Ripples of Mashiach consciousness. By me learning Torah, I'm going to create ripples of Mashiach consciousness throughout our surroundings and cultivate an environment in which the mission of Mashiach can actually be fulfilled. The Rebbe is calling for so much more. The Rebbe is begging us, transform the world. Don't just create ripples of Mashiach consciousness. That's the most flaccid, passive way possible. If I'll change, it'll create ripples in the world. And it's very interesting that when we discuss the mitzvah of learning Torah and how learning Torah affects the non-Jews, we'll see that the Rebbe's approach is that non-Jews are supposed to learn Torah even to great depth in a way of pilpul. There's a hadith on the Rambam that we're going to learn to that extent. And I came across in a distinguished Torah journal a article on this very same subject by a Litvische journal that its position is, no, the non-Jews are not supposed to learn Torah. And not only that, we're not even supposed to, because they rely on certain sources, which the Rebbe acknowledges, but then shows that those sources are really very limited in their application. And the Litvische article goes on to say that not only that, we're not even supposed to really, God forbid, I don't even want to utter these words, but this is something that they're writing, that we should only affect the non-Jews by way of example and through the ripple effect. That by being upright Jews, that will provide an example and elevate the rest of the world. That's not what the Rebbe is saying. The Rebbe is saying we have to be teaching the world, we have to be influencing the world, we have to be overturning the world. So let's check into what we're being taught and what we're teaching our children. Here, it's a beautiful Sefer Yom Yom that's saying something that so limits what the Rebbe is really saying, what the Rebbe is really intending, what the Rebbe really wants to turn over the entire world, not through a passive process where I just radiate and the radiation and the ripples and have an effect. We're commanded to conquer the world. We're commanded to go, and the Rambam says to go and compel the entire world to serve God. The Rambam was not just, the Avraham Avinu was, as we learned from the Sefer Mitzvos, he was not just passively waiting for his radiance to ripple over to other people. He was dragging them in off the streets. He was building orchards, and he was building food production facilities to be able to bring these people in and to teach them. And he was out campaigning with God to save humanity from destruction. And he was going out to influence people, and he was taking responsibility for people. And he was trying to reach every single human being. And he was making the shamas, he was making people into to God-fearing people. This is what the Rebbe is talking about. The Rebbe is the Avram of the generation. The Rebbe is the Moshe of the generation. This is what he's calling us to. This is what Koyach Nissan is about. So I'd like you, every one of us, to take stock of that. And we have to do a cheshbon nefesh. How have we allowed the Rebbe's words to become so muted and so limited? This is not what the Rebbe is saying. The Rebbe is saying, we see Karavel Taint, and Koyach Nissan is dispelling any illusions that we might have had that we're going to rely on the Rebbe to do it for us. He's saying, me and you are responsible for figuring out what needs to be done to change this, change the tikkun, the kelim, the tikkun, to be ready to go grasp the light, change the eres to tehu, to be ready to be received. Ready to be received by the vessels of tikkun, by the teachers, the Yidden, who are the teachers to the world. And between that, to that explosive, beyond nuclear combination, explosive in a positive sense of transformation They're creating an energy that is the transformation of the world to where it become obvious the Beis Hamikdash needs to be built. It will become obvious that we're supposed to serve Hashem. It will become obvious that the laws need to reflect God's will. And that, my dear friends, is the Rebbe's call to us on Kiyach Nissan. This is what he's begging us to see. This is what he's begging us to look to. This is what he's begging us to recognize. And I implore each one of us to really take that to stock, this Kiyach Nissan, and take it to heart, and excuse me, and really go full force into action, which we will continue to do every day. We're not going to just wait for next week's class. We are going to continue every moment, every day, to spread God's message of hope in the world. Thank you very much for participating and listening, and please feel free to send your questions and any additional insights that you have. Thank you very much.